Welcome to MJ Legal's Skilled Migration presentation. This presentation is a teaser of all the skill migration consultations we do at MJ Legal. To introduce ourselves, we're a specialized migration law firm. You'll also find another category of service providers called migration agents. The main difference with us is we can provide a full suite of migration advice, all the way from student visas to making permanent residency applications. When there are refusals, we can assist you with going to the Administrative Appeals Tribunal and even going to the federal court if required. Our office is based in Melbourne, Collins Street, but we are providing services throughout Australia and also to clients who are overseas. When it comes to applying for permanent residency in Australia, there are a few pathways. One is as a humanitarian migrant, that's somebody who is a refugee. There is as a partner of an Australian permanent resident or citizen, or a parent of an Australian permanent resident or citizen. But if you are on a student visa, a work visa, or a 485 visa, you will be contained or considered a skilled migrant. As a skilled migrant, there are only two pathways to permanent residency. The left-hand side, we have skilled migration, and on the right-hand side, we have employer-sponsored visas. Both these pathways require you to have a skill assessment or a skill on the skilled occupation list. When it comes to the left-hand side skill migration, we have three visas. Subclass 189 and the 190 are permanent residency visas. The 189 visa is granted by the federal government in Canberra, while the 190 visa is granted by the state government. Australia has about 6 states and 2 territories, and each of them run their own migration program. So at MJ Legal, when you come to a consultation with us, we will look at the state that you're in and also all the other states that you could potentially move to, and look at their rules, compare them with your background, and give you advice. The 491 is a regional visa of 5 years, so it's a temporary visa. But you will only get permanent residency after living and working in a regional area for 3 years. Remember, Melbourne, Sydney, and Brisbane are not considered regional areas, so you can't apply for a 491 from those three cities. When it comes to employer-sponsored visas, the most common visa that all applicants go for is the 482, because this is the visa that allows you to apply with just 1 year of work experience in your occupation in the last 5 years. And given that most applicants are kind of applying for this visa after they finish their student visa and they are on their 485, they only have 2 years, so it makes sense to go to the 482. So the process usually is you go for the 482 first, then you work for 2 years on the 482. You can work for the same employer or multiple employers as long as you work on the 482 for 2 years. Your employer can then sponsor you for the 186, which is the permanent residency visa. If you have 3 years full-time work experience, you can directly go for the 186 visa or the 494 if your employer is based in a regional location. So when you come to a consultation with us, we will look at your work experience and your education experience and tell you which visa subclasses makes the most sense. When it comes to skill migration, we have to mainly look at the data, because once we know the data, and lawyers such as myself carefully track this data to be able to give you very actionable insights on how the likelihood of getting permanent residency or not if you continue on your current pathway. So when we look at the 189 visas, we basically have a quarterly invitation. So every quarter, the federal government conducts an invitation round. So in the most recent quarter, 13th November 2025, they gave 10,000 invitations. And you can see the occupations that they invited against those invitations. So you can see that construction and trades workers were invited with the lowest point, 65. That's the minimum required. Then health and medical, then education, and then we are going to the engineering and science, other science fields. So right now, if you're a construction trade worker, a healthcare worker, or somebody in the education field, very high chance of getting permanent residency. When it comes to the 190 and 491, that's the state-sponsored visas. The federal government, in the start of every financial year or the migration year, which starts on the 1st of July and ends on the 30th of June, gives each state an allocation of visas and say, okay, this is the total number of people you can invite for permanent residency in this financial year. So if you are based in Melbourne like we are, the total number of 190s you can get is 2,700. So you have to be one of 2,700. If you're in Western Australia, you can be one of 2,000, right? So even though there are a total of 12,850, you can only be eligible for the allocation in your state. As you can see, we also look at the data that we track the data on how many spots have been granted to date. So on the date you come for a consultation with us, we will tell you how many spots are left. This is crucially important if your 485 is expiring in the next 12 months, because you really need to know it, because usually the migration program that starts on the 1st of July comes to an end around April or May and reopens again around August, September. So if your visa is expiring in the latter half of a year, you have to be very, very careful. So we will look at all of that, and we will even recommend which states you can move to depending on the allocation left and also the demand for your skill in that state. Remember, not all states need all skills in Australia because different states have different economies. That was the total supply. This is the total demand for visas in Australia. So there's over about 1.3 million temporary visa holders in Australia, and the vast majority of them are hoping for permanent residency. But in a given year, only about 35,000 get PR. So at MJ Legal, we specialize in ensuring that you have the best strategy to become one of those 35,000 people in a given year. So if you come to us while you're on a student visa, the first thing we will do is we will evaluate and see what is the skill you can get, how many other people are currently waiting with that skill for an invitation, whether we can retrain you so you can get a better skill that is in higher demand, and we will advise you. So if you come on a student visa, before you go for a 485, we will advise whether it's good to go for a 485 or whether you should go for another student visa, or if you go for a 485, what type of skills you can get an assessment in and whether that will lead to PR or not. 485 comes in 3 streams. So as long as you've done a diploma or lower, you'll get an 18-month work visa. If you've done a bachelor's or higher, you'll get about 2 years. And if you studied a bachelor's or higher in a regional state, being not Melbourne, Sydney, or Brisbane, you can extend that 485 for another year. The requirements for the 485 is that you have completed your course in the last 6 months, or your student visa has not expired for more than 6 months. So particularly applicants who are on bridging visas have to be very careful. You must be 35 years or under. You must have done your English language in the last 12 months, so IELTS or PTE, and the score is here. You must have completed a 2-year course in at least 16 months, and you must do an Australian Federal Police check for both yourself and your spouse if you have a spouse. So once you go on to a 485, our goal is to give you a strategy on how quickest to achieve a permanent residency through the skill migration pathway or set up the employer sponsorship as a backup. So as I said earlier, the first step to getting permanent residency is to identify the skill and see whether you can get a skill assessment or what are the requirements of a skill assessment. Lots of skills assessments require you to both have an education qualification and 1 year of work experience. So if you don't identify that at the very start, because most of you will only get a 2-year 485 visa, you're going to really struggle. The second step is we will do a points test calculation for you and advise you on how to improve your points. The third step is we will assist you with making an expression of interest to the federal government, where we tell them, hey, I have a skill on the skilled occupation list. I have at least 65 points. I'm interested in applying for PR. Invite me. The fourth step is we will tell you what state to go to. Should you stay in the state you're in? Should you move states? And we will track your expression of interest, because the migration rules change after the 1st of July every year when the states receive their allocation from the federal government. The last step is if you are invited to apply for PR, we will help you with making the skill migration application. And if you're not invited, or if we feel like you're not going to get invited and your visa is running out in the next, say, 6 months, we will assist you or advise you on how to create a backup strategy for employer sponsorship. So if you think this is the type of advice you need, if this is the type of law firm you want to work with, I strongly encourage you to book a consultation and come in. In my consultation, I will guide you on how to create a successful migration strategy and be one of those individuals who get to call Australia your permanent home as a permanent resident. Thank you for listening to me.